Please rise.
Thank you. Are we ready to go to start? Yes? You guys can be seated till the jury gets here.
Judge, I don't know if now that we've got a second, it's a good time to chat about something.
Well, that's why I asked a second ago, but nobody said anything. What do you got?
I'm sorry, I was in the throes of looking at what I need to talk to the court about. There's a Google Earth presentation that I believe the prosecution wants to introduce. They are telling me that they're going to do it through Investigator Chuck Heidel. It is some of the items found on Middle Mountain in the areas that have been described. It's not all of the items. As Your Honor is aware, there's only been a couple of GPS coordinates that have been put on the record. So what Mr. Champagne tells me is that the folks who have testified, I believe, have said out of court that when they looked at this Google Earth, it's sort of an interactive thing, that they agree that it's fair and accurate. But
I believe they've said it in court. I've heard it more than once.
But we had no idea what they were referring to, and they're not talking about a specific exhibit, so they're saying some Google Earth thing that we haven't previously seen until right now.
Well,
so the fact that...
Hold on. This hasn't been provided.
Judge, this is one of our exhibits that we've created. I do not believe it's been provided, no. We provided them all of the static pictures exhibits, but none of the discs have been provided.
All right. Go ahead, Mr. Moran.
So I've just had a moment to try to think through the issues here, but asking someone on the stand if something they were shown outside of the courtroom is fair and accurate, I don't think establishes a proper foundation to publish this to the jury. What is happening out of the courtroom is out-of-court statements, I guess. I'm going to need a second to think this through, but I don't understand the means by which this item of evidence is introduced. And my problem with it is that it's incomplete. It doesn't contain things that we have geo coordinates for. Several different things within our geolocation, or we have geolocation for that didn't make it into this.
When did you file the exhibit list, Mr. Champagne? Approximately?
I believe it was like May 27th. It was whenever the court requested it.
Okay, that sounds about right.
All right. And I know there's a lot of exhibits. I think you got 500 listed or close to it. Remember right?
Yeah, it's been pared down since then. That was the original list.
All right.
If I can explain, do you care to know any more about the foundation or creation of the exhibit?
Well, you're going to lay some more foundation, aren't you?
Yeah, Judge, so the basic scenario here is the GPS locations were extracted by Investigator Heidel, used to create a map. That map, which is an interactive map, it's an animation, was shown to all the witnesses who have items of evidence that are identified within it, outside of court. They reviewed it. They came into court to testify that what they saw on Investigator Heidel's exhibit was fair and accurate representation of the items that they had found and the locations that they had found.
I mean,
I testified.
Have them wait just a second.
We testified in court that this is a fair and accurate exhibit.
This out-of-court creation is a fair and accurate, but it wouldn't have stood out to us because I don't know what they were talking about.
Well, it stood out to me, and I didn't know what they were talking about. I mean, I know you guys have other things to think about than I do. Think about different things. It caught my attention when I brought it up 2 or 3 times.
Judge, the question then was this out-of-court presentation made to you by Mr. Heidel fair and accurate, and defense counsel hadn't had an opportunity to review it or know what Investigator Heidel's, what this even is? And that, you know, if this is a situation...
Hold on, please. Can you delay this a little bit and do something in a different order? Is that going to be a problem?
We'll do whatever the court wants us to do, Judge.
That's my question.
Yes.
I know you'll do whatever. I know you do.
Yeah, that's fine, Judge. We can do it at a later time in our presentation. I don't think this is necessary. This is essentially a map, right? We have introduced endless number of maps. This map just happens to be an animation where the camera angle moves. No different Anything else that's been admitted so far, it's not, yeah, and just like every other map, and I'm sure the defense has maps as well that don't include everything we want on them. That's not, I don't think, a good faith objection or grounds to preclude it or delay it.
What else do you want to say?
Part of what creates my concern here is that, as the court observed with Investigator Patterson yesterday, we are showing him photographs that he took. We've got the geolocal coordinates of items that he took into evidence, and he's just saying, I don't know. And so those sorts of items are not making it on this map, and it's creating a misleading impression with the jury. But this out-of-court viewing of something that was described in court but wasn't shown in court seems an awful lot like hearsay. It's not just a map. This is evidence that was created up on this mountain where geolocations are taken and recorded, and witnesses. I think that the method by which you do this, and the way we were planning to do it, was to put on the record, here's the geolocation of this item, and then it's in court on the record where something was found. Otherwise, it's this just strange means of seeking to introduce something where it's happening outside of the courtroom, but we can't see it, and we don't know what they're talking about it because we haven't been provided this in discovery. It's on a list of 500 plus items, which we were requesting to see pre-trial, but we're not shown this particular thing until 5-6 minutes. 10.
Brief response?
Sure.
This is no different than playing an audio recording to a witness, having them sign the disc, and then in the courtroom saying, do you recognize this? Yes. How do you recognize it? Because my signature is on it. Did you review this prior to the court proceeding? Yes. Is it fair and accurate? Yes. This is exactly the same process, Your Honor.
But they weren't shown it in court.
They talked about it. I'm going to allow it to happen. It can happen now. If you need to call Investigator Heidel back as part of your case for later on, we've got plenty of time. I don't really see it being a whole lot different. I tend to agree with Mr. Champagne. I'm a little concerned there wasn't any conversation between the parties about this. This was a little different, but it's a huge case. I can understand why there's problems. So with that, let's bring it to jury. So how do you do this? Everybody rise, please. Okay, we can be seated.
Yes, Your Honor. As we discussed at the bench, that is appropriate.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is ask Aaron to turn the camera towards me. I'll make my parents happy. Okay, and I didn't write down your name. I'm sorry, what was it again?
Leigha, Foster?
Ms. Foster, would you take off your mask
Yes,
now,
of
please?
course.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Champagne.
Thank you. Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Hi, my name is Leigha Foster.
And where are you from, Ms. Foster?
I am from Louisiana.
Very good.
Louisiana. Leigha, L-E-I-G-H-A. My apologies. L-E-I-G-H-A.
How long have you lived in Colorado, Ms. Foster?
6-7 years now.
Okay. And I want to take your attention back to the fall of 2015. Were you living in Colorado at that time?
Yes.
Where were you living?
Vallecito.
Okay. And specifically November 1st of 2015. Do you recall that day?
Yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about what you were doing on that day.
Me and my husband were going on a hike
Okay. Where were you hiking?
on Middle Mountain Road.
All right. And do you recall where on Middle Mountain you were hiking?
At the very top.
Very top.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you recall the name of that area, or just that it was at the top?
No, just as at the top of Middle Mountain Road.
Okay. And tell me about your hike that day. Was there anything unusual that happened?
Yes.
Okay. Tell us, please.
Me and my husband, we were hiking down a slope. We decided to go out. We ate lunch underneath a tree, and we saw some beautiful trees coming up, so we decided to go walk down an area, and went a little ways in, little streams everywhere. It was very beautiful. And then my husband picked up something, and he said, "Hey, honey, what do you think this is?" And I saw it, and I could see it in his hands. I was right behind him, a few steps behind him. I didn't know exactly until I got up right with him. I took it from his hands, and immediately I knew it was a human skull.
And what happened next?
He disagreed with me. He said, "No, it's not." I said, "Yeah, baby, yeah, it is." And he said, "Well, what do you want to do now?" I said, "Well, we got to go turn it in. We got to go back." And he's like, "Well, I want to walk around for a little bit longer." So I said, "Okay, I prefer to come back, but there was no service up there. We had to, go back down Middle Mountain Road, at least get to the store to get service." So we decided to go walk a little bit more, and we went a little further down. There were streams that came out to a bigger stream, and then across from that, there was still snow on the ground. And we're not very used to snow, so my husband was very excited about seeing snow, and he decided he wanted to go on to the other side. And we crossed it by a big log that was laying over, connecting both sides. We crossed over. As soon as we crossed over, though, we noticed that there were prints in the snow that looked like bear prints to us. And we knew it's Bear Mountain for a reason. So we decided to turn back and go back. And I said, "Yeah, we need to get back. Don't want to come in contact with the mama bear and her cubs, and I need to go and find out who I needed to contact and say I found a human skull in the woods."
Now, had you carried the skull with you during that whole hike? Or?
No. He set it back down.
And I want you to describe that in detail for me. How did he go about doing that? Did he drop it? Did he?
No, he didn't drop it. He just literally set it down.
Okay. And at any time from the moment that you saw him pick it up to the time that he put it back down and you all walked on, did you see it get damaged in any way, shape, or form?
No. I believe there was a small little stream, because like I said, there was multiple little streams everywhere. There was a little stream right next to where he saw it, where he picked it up. And I believe he set it right in that little stream, so maybe it wouldn't go anywhere, is why I asked him, I was like, why'd you do that? And he's like, "I don't want it to go anywhere, if I remember correctly." That's what he said.
Okay. When you found it, was it on the dry land or in the water?
Yeah, it was on a little dry land. There was a little patch of green grass, little streams all around. It was just lying right there.
Okay, do you remember if it was with the round part up or if the round part was down?
I don't remember, because that part, you had that coming back.
Okay.
He picked it up. I'm sorry. Oh, he picked it up.
And did you handle it?
I did. I took it from his hand.
Okay. And when you handled it, did it feel dry to the touch or wet? Do you have any
Maybe
recollection?
slightly down, because the grass was slightly down, so I'm sure it's fine.
Did it leave any kind of residue or anything on your hands?
I believe we had gloves on.
Okay. Now, I think, did either of you cut the skull in any way, shape, or form with a knife?
No.
And When you saw him put it down, could you actually step down and come out here and just demonstrate for us exactly what that looked like?
The jury needs to see, so.
Yeah, turn all the way.
Mr. Bogan, you can.
You have to rotate so all the jurors can see you. There we go. Great, thank you. You can have a seat again. When it touched the ground, did you see it bounce off any hard rocks or hard objects?
No,
Did you hear it crack or break in any way?
no,
Do you have any reason to think it was damaged when it touched the ground?
no,
And then when you saw him pick it up, did he pick it up in any way that would have damaged it at all?
no.
What did you do after you got back from your hike?
He went back into the house. My neighbor was outside, so I walked up to him. We were friends at that time, and I asked him if he knew of a number I could call, because I had found something in the woods. It looked like human remains, and he said yes. He gave me a direct line number. I called him, told him I believe I found a human skull up on Middle Mountain, and the woman on the phone said, I will have someone contact you. And shortly after that, another woman, I believe a detective, contacted me. Or
And after she contacted you, what happened after that?
I told her who I was, told her that me and my husband were hiking up on Middle Mountain Road and that we had found a human skull, and that it was pretty, all the way up there. There was no service out there. It was pretty rough terrain up there. And she said, I can't remember everything that was said in between that time, but I know that she said that they were going to come out the next day, I believe, and that I could go and show them where we found it. I go back.
And is that in fact what happened?
Yes.
Tell us about that process.
The next day, we decided to meet at that little grocery store right across from Circle S Lodge, where I was staying, and they met us. I met them there. We went up, and we started the process of us showing them where we were at and where we found it.
Did that take some time to
It did.
Yeah.
Because it was only my second time back in that spot, and I knew that it wasn't that far when we started hiking down that. We went into the big trees where we had come across it, but we ended up going across. They ended up taking me back down where we had crossed over the river, but I knew it was back up there. But they were saying, let's just trace their steps. So we ended up not finding it that day again.
And what happened after that?
We decided to go the next day. Again, they were going to come back, and we called my husband so he could come and also help.
Okay. Did you have more success on that attempt?
Yes.
And tell us about how it is that you came to find it.
We were hiking. We were back up, and because me and my husband were saying, no, we were back up towards this area, I think, and he actually is the one who found it.
And tell me about that specifically. What do you remember about him finding it?
I wasn't right by him.
Okay.
He was behind me, I think.
Okay.
And I was we were looking at another little spot not far from him, and he found it. He said, I found it.
Okay. And then what happened after that?
The detective and some other officers came over, and they took the skull from Daniel, and that was it.
If I showed you some photographs of that, of the skull, would you recognize it?
I'm pretty sure it was.
Okay. I'm going to put up exhibit number 349 on the screen. It's been previously introduced.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, we'll start at 349. Let's go to 350. Let's start there. Do you recognize that, ma'am?
Yes.
And is that the skull that you found?
Yes.
351. You recognize
Yeah.
this? Were you there when these photographs were taken?
Yeah, I must have been.
Okay.
It looks
And let's
like
go
it
to
is.
352, please. 353. These are all images of the skull. Is that the same thing that you recall seeing that day?
Yes.
354. 355. Is this the same condition that you found in when it was found?
Yeah, it looks like it.
356.
Yeah.
357.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. One moment, please. I don't have any further questions for you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Wait, you have to wait. Yeah. Defense counsel probably will.
Oh, of course.
Go ahead, Mr. Bogan.
Thank you. Ms. Foster, if you can't hear me or if I'm not speaking clearly, just let the judge or me know and I'll adjust volume and try and articulate, okay? I want to discuss with you when you and Daniel Foster first came across the skull. And that was on November 1st of 2015, correct? When was it?
No, the November 1st.
And I can't
I'm
hear
off on the dates. I'm sorry.
Okay, then you know what, the date's not, I don't think the date's important for this part of the conversation. I just want to talk to you about when you and Daniel, without law enforcement, first found the skull, okay?
Okay.
And that was a day, as you described on direct, you and Daniel were walking around on what you understood to be the top of Middle Mountain Road, correct?
Yes.
And can you generally describe what that area looks like? Are we talking about craggy spire, mountaintop, or what? Just paint the picture for us.
I remember there was a lot of cows. There was, on the right side as you're going up where we decided to stop, there was more of an open pasture. They had some city trees, and they had a lot of cows everywhere. On the other side, there was maybe a little bit of land, but it was more mountainy going up, if I remember correctly.
And it sounds like the two of you were going on a hike that day, correct? And it sounds like you weren't hiking on an established trail. Like you didn't stop and say, oh, here's a trailhead, let's go.
No, we wouldn't.
And safe to say that's kind of the way you and Daniel hike. You guys don't look for trails, do you?
Not really, no.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. We just, if we see a place that looks pretty or we want to explore, kind of while we came to Colorado, and we don't specifically always look for a specific trail to go on.
And safe to say, when you go on these adventures, you're looking for someplace pretty to go explore, right?
Yeah, someplace quiet, beautiful, peaceful.
And safe to say, when you go on these adventures with Daniel, you kind of follow drainages, yes?
We do. We like to stick with flowing rivers.
And that's what you did on this date, the day you first found the skull, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And tell me if I'm getting this wrong. You drove up Middle Mountain Road and you came to this area that you understand as the top of Middle Mountain Road, correct?
Yes. I know there's a little further up, little ways up, there was a guardrail, and there were people up there with vehicles parked. The first time I went up there, with my neighbor, took me up there, and he said that that's where people go and hunt. So don't go to that area up there. So we stopped a little before that. And on this side is where we got out. We went ate lunch under a tree and walked out, saw it go downhill, decided to go down there.
And while you were describing this for us, you were kind of making a gesture with your right hand, kind of saying this stuff was on the right. And I'm paraphrasing what you just said, right?
Yes.
And when you got up to this area that's popular with hunters, wide open, you said you saw some cows.
Yes.
And if I understood your testimony correctly, you saw the cows on the right side of the pasture.
They were also on the left side too.
Okay. Cows on, and when we say the right side of the pasture, we're also talking about the right side of Middle Mountain Road as you're going up.
Yes.
Correct? Okay. So we got, and you saw cows on the left side of the
Yes.
road. And to the best of your recollection, during your hike where you saw the, I think you described them as beautiful trees.
They were, yes.
Did you see cow droppings in that?
We did, and we looked very carefully when we decided to, this tree that we picked, to make sure that we wasn't going to be sitting on it while we ate.
Sounds like there were a lot of droppings there.
There was quite a bit.
And if I understand your story correctly, you hiked for a while, had a picnic in a section or underneath a beautiful tree. Is that right?
Well, we actually.
Hold on a second.
We're just essentially redoing the direct here. We're not moving forward. These questions are not valuable to the jury.
Well, I think the last set were, and we'll see where this one goes. I understand what he was doing a second ago, but we'll see where you go, Mr. Bogan.
How long did you hike for before you stopped to have that picnic?
We didn't, we had the picnic first because we didn't actually get up there and get out of the vehicle until about 11:30, almost 12 o'clock. So we decided to eat lunch first before we decided to go on our hike.
And to the best of your recollection, how long did you hike down this area before you came across the skull?
We didn't hike very long before. We went out when we were in the open pasture area, and we were walking, and the slope where it goes down, and then you see these, the trees, I think they're called celebrations. They come up all like that. We sat down on that hill, and then we decided to go right down because of how the trees were. They came up like this and just went in like that. And it was kind of like it was inviting us to come in and explore. That's the way we thought about it. And we decided to get up, and we started our hike. And not too long after that, I can't even say 15 to 20 minutes maybe, give or take a few. We're pretty fast hikers going down.
Do you know how much distance you covered before you came to the skull?
I really could not tell you, no.
And I'd ask the people to publish 349, please. Does that look like the area where you first saw the cranium, the skull?
It looks by the area. That actually looks like the area or spot that, maybe Daniel has set it back down again. But like I was trying to explain, I explained earlier, when we found it, it was a little flatter. There wasn't many things right on it that it was sitting on. It was just sitting on like a perfect little nest of moss and grass, and right next to it was, some little trails, little streams, and some sticks, yeah. So that's about the area.
And unpack that for us a little bit. You said where you first saw the skull, it appeared to be like a little nest, like where an animal.
Well, not like a nest. It wasn't, that crowded. That was like right next to where we found it. He actually picked it up from, right next to it, was on more flatter area. There was nothing covering it. There was nothing, it wasn't like sitting on a big log or rock or anything like that. It looked more like smooth, grass, leaves, like that.
And
then I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
And then when he set it back down, he set it down literally like right next to the spot where he found it, and that looks like the spot where he put it, or spot. So, yeah.
And And focusing your attention on where you first saw the skull, safe to say that looked like a place where an animal would live, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I guess. There's animals all around
And
that live there.
you say, yeah, I guess. You've actually spoken to Mr. Champagne and one of his investigators, Karen Neighbor, about this exact incident, correct? You've spoken to the prosecutor on the far right here about this, correct?
About,
About the day you found the skull, correct?
yes.
Okay. And do you recall telling Mr. Champagne on February 15th, 2020 at about 11 a.m. that this place looked like a place where an animal would live?
It sounds like something my husband would say.
Does it sound like something you would say?
Not necessarily. I probably would agree with him, but it sounds like something that he would say.
And do you recall that interview with these prosecutors that happened with you and Daniel?
I do, yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like you hiked for a while further after you made this discovery, correct?
A little bit. Not too long, I would say.
And then, as you testified on direct, you saw some snow up there that day, correct?
Yes.
And with it,
Now I'm going to agree with Mr. Champagne. I don't understand how this adds to either case at this point.
I want to highlight some of her observations, Judge, because I think it's important. It's going to get touched on by experts.
All right.
Within that snow and around that snow, you identified bear tracks, correct?
To us, we thought it was bear tracks, yes. I believe we saw some little smaller tracks behind it, which kind of scared us a little bit.
And they looked enough like bear tracks to the point where you and Daniel decided to leave, correct?
Yes.
Because you didn't want to run into a bear.
Absolutely, especially a mama bear and her cubs.
And then you did come back 2 days later with your husband, Daniel, and law enforcement on November 3rd, correct?
Yes, because the day after that, it was just me that went out with him the first time, and we didn't have any luck in finding it. And then the next day after that, Daniel came with us, with law enforcement.
And were you searching for a long time when you came back with Daniel and law enforcement?
Actually, no, I wouldn't say that long. Maybe half an hour. I could be wrong, give or take. I know the first day with just me, it was a long time. We just wasn't having any luck on finding it again.
And can you describe for the jury what Daniel did when he rediscovered this item?
I remember him saying, "I found it," and we turned around and it was in his hand. And then,
Did he hold it above his head and yell, "Skull"?
no,
And safe to say you were with a woman detective or investigator that day?
yeah.
And how did she respond to that?
She went over to him and took it from him.
And then obviously you've identified this item in several pictures, correct?
Yeah.
And you saw law enforcement take it into custody or collect it or whatever, correct?
Yes.
And do you recall the woman detective saying, "I can't wait to see the look on his face"?
Objection.
1610-201.
Hold on, why?
Hearsay.
It's a prior inconsistent statement he's trying to establish.
1610-201. I think the foundation was laid with the last witness,
It
Judge.
was.
Okay, thank you, Judge.
Do you recall the woman investigator detective, upon making this discovery, saying, "I can't wait to see the look on his face"?
Yes.
How did that strike you?
Objection, relevance.
Mr. Bogan?
I'll move on. Did you observe law enforcement doing any other searching around the area after this item was found?
I believe they did, yes.
Nothing further, Judge.
Redirect?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Any questions from the jury? Looks like we have one. Oh. Okay, Ms. Foster, we have a question from the jury. So I'm going to ask it, but they need to hear the answer, so look at them when you answer.
Okay.
All right. How far apart were the places between where the skull was found initially and then later rediscovered a couple days later?
Right next to it.
So within a foot, a yard, 6 feet, any idea?
Just a few, like maybe a foot, if that, not even.
Okay. Anything on that?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Bogan?
No, sir.
All right. Can this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, please.
Okay. You step down. Thank you. Next witness?
People call Investigator Chuck Heidel to the stand.
Okay, come on up, please. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, before you start. You can go a little more. Well, maybe that's about right. That's about right. Go ahead.
Thank you, Judge. One moment, please. Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Chuck Heidel, and it's spelled Heidel.
What do you do, sir?
I'm an investigator with the Boulder County District Attorney's Office.
How long have you been so employed?
I've been with Boulder DA's office for about the past 2.5 years. Prior to that, I was with the Jefferson County DA's office, which is right outside of Denver, for about 2 years. Prior to that, I was with the Boulder Police Department for 32 years. The last 17 years was in the Major Crimes Unit. And then I started my career with the Greeley Police Department way back in about 1982, I think it was.
And what's your current role in this case?
Well, I'm an investigator for the DA's office. The Boulder DA's office is assisting with this case, as did the Jefferson County DA's office when I was with them. Currently, what I'm doing is doing the duties of a DA's investigator, which is assist with interviews of witnesses, doing trial prep with expert witnesses, and just about anything else that we need to do to get prepared for trial.
Okay. Did you review the searches and locations where evidence was found in this case?
I did.
Are you familiar with the locations of the items of evidence collected?
Yes, I am.
And which items and which searches do you recall? I can also refresh your recollection if that would be helpful.
Well, basically the searches from the recovery of remains and items that were eventually found to belong to Dylan Redwine on Middle Mountain Road.
Middle Mountain Road, and specifically the June 2013 search?
That's correct.
And the other searches where, that same area where remains were found later?
Yes, and subsequent searches, and then the later search, where witness just talked about where the cranium was recovered.
And did you create a Google Earth animation based on the locations of those items?
I did.
And how did you input the information into that map?
So, actually, I've already seen some of the Google Earth images up here. There's some of the maps that we did for search areas that some of the witnesses talked about are just stills of Google Earth screen captures. So what I did was I entered the long lat, the locations for those particular items.
Let me stop you there briefly. You used a term of art, long lat. What does that mean?
Longitude and latitude.
Okay.
And those are, in this case, they were taken from GPS units at the sites. And then I put those into Google Earth, and then Google Earth, I can make a marker where that location is. And I did that for each of these items.
And where did you draw the information from to put it into the map?
From the report that investigators had made, searchers, whoever found the items, and then did the GPS location.
Now, there were certain items that didn't have a GPS location associated to them, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And what did you work from to ascertain the locations of those items?
So some of them, I think one of the investigators talked yesterday or the day before about a big rock, house rock. He used that for...
Sorry, if I may, and pardon me for interrupting, sir. So that it's clear, our objection is hearsay to this testimony.
Right, but he's explaining how he located certain areas. There was testimony about the big rock, which was later identified as being house rock. And I think it's appropriate. I don't think it's hearsay. So your previous objections are also noted.
The long lat was not noted on that item, and that's part of where our concern stems from.
Correct. And that's what we're talking about. I understand that. So your objection is overruled. Go ahead.
Sorry, sir, you were saying that there was a large rock that was testified about previously in court. And what other items did you use for the...
Yeah, so some of the locations were based on locations that they did have a longitude, latitude GPS location for. I think there was one that talked about, 75 feet north of such and such location. And so I used that where I didn't have the actual long lat, but for longitude, latitude. But
Your Honor, that particular statement has not been testified to as an out-of-court statement provided for the truth of the matter. Objection hearsay.
So overruled, this is why he located it where it was, and I guess we can just talk about the fact that he reviewed the reports. I would not put in the actual distances because I agree that would be hearsay.
Thank you, Judge.
But I still think this comes in. So go ahead.
Let me direct you. Do you recall a hand-drawn map that one of the investigators created as well?
yes,
And did you use that for some of the items that did not have a GPS location?
yes, I did.
And did you actually go back out to Middle Mountain and individually visit each site where a GPS location was entered?
Yes, I did.
Did anybody go with you?
Yes, Investigator Ezzell went with me because he was up there during the actual search.
And after you created the Google Earth animation, have you been here in court listening to the other witnesses testify?
Yes,
And were you present when the investigators who had found these items testified that they reviewed your Google Earth animation?
yes,
And that they testified that it was a fair and accurate representation of where they found those items?
yes.
At this point, I've moved to admit Exhibit 488.
I'm sorry, didn't you hear the number?
488, I believe it's 488.
.488 will be admitted.
And move to publish for the jury.
You may.
Our objection on that is that it obviates confrontation. So Article 2, Section 16.
We've already discussed this, all right? So we've made a record. So you can sit down because you've objected to it.
Okay.
Can you turn off the middle bank of lights, please, Robbie?
Your Honor, if I may, just to constitutionalize the U.S. and Colorado Constitution. Thank you.
No, you make a record once, you don't make it 3 times, please.
All right, we've got exhibit number 488 up on the screen. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
And can you just, let's see, I think I have the pointer here.
Yes.
Before we begin the animation, if you could just point out the major points of interest on the map.
Sure, it's locations we've already,
You can move the stand.
locations we've already talked about. So this is the north end of Heidel Lake. This is Mark Redwine's residence here. And then this is the first recovery site. And then this is the second recovery site. And then this is Little Mountain Road.
Okay, you can go ahead and play it. If you could just pause it right here, please. Thanks. What are we seeing in this view?
Okay, so this is a view of all the items related to Dylan Redwine that were recovered, including all of the bones that were recovered. And what I've got on here is the item number from the Plata County Sheriff's Department when they numbered these items. And then there's actually text there saying exactly what those items are.
Okay. If you could move the video forward, please.
Okay, so this is, if you look in your upper right-hand corner here, this is going to show the direction north. So we're looking sort of south, this is southwest there. This is a road we've been talking about. You kind of see the path going down here. This is just, again, a different view of all the items we just saw.
And at the risk of sort of belaboring the record here, could you read off the items that are listed on this portion of the exhibit?
Sure. It's the right and left femur, tibia, sock, shoe, black fabric with lettering, hair clump, clavicle, earbuds, toe bones, piece of shirt, and then the scapula.
Now, this actually comprises searches that extended over a multiple year period. Is that right?
Your Honor, if I may, the court was sustaining objections as to the characterization of particular bones based on hearsay coming from Dr. Mulhern. Now they're here in writing, being testified to in an exhibit that defense counsel is seeing for the very first time today, this iteration of it for the very first time this second.
Your Honor, as I mentioned earlier, our exhibit list was provided on May 27th to defense counsel. They did not choose to request to see this exhibit, and all of these items were testified by the names referred to on this document.
They were both objected to, sustained, and testified to as being, that's what they were without objection. I think that the jury understands, and I'm going to instruct them that these are, let me think for a second. In terms of what these actually were, you haven't heard from any experts as to what they were, and since this is how they were identified in the past, I'm going to let it go forward. So your objection is overruled. Go ahead.
Your Honor, may I request that we get a copy of this?
I would think you can just ask for anything. So yes, you should be able to get a copy of it. When can you provide that, Mr. Shanson?
Today.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Let's go ahead and progress with the video.
Okay, this is a close-up from the initial items that were recovered. This does not have a scapula in there. I'm just trying to get a little closer to show where these items were recovered.
Okay, go ahead and keep moving forward with the video.
Just circling around clockwise. This is a different angle. Again, and in this one, the scapula, in this one, the scapula is up here, but it's got all the items that we saw.
Okay, thank you.
Again, all the items, just a different angle.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the characterization of this as all of the items. That's not anything that previous witnesses testified to, and it's untrue.
Your objection is noted. The jury can take the testimony for what they think it's worth. Your objection's overruled.
Okay, this is backing out, and this is from west to east, I believe. Yes, and this is Mark Redwine's residence, and it's just showing the recovery site we talked about, and then the second recovery site where the cranium was recovered. And then, of course, Middle Mountain Road. Moving in closer to where the cranium was located, circling around. This shows Middle Mountain Road up here, and then there's a 4x4 road that was talked about that runs up along that west side. And then this is, I think this is sort of the last shot showing all the two recovery locations, Middle Mountain Road, and Mark Redwine's residence.
Thank you. You can have a seat, Investigator Heidel. As part of your work in creating that map, were you able to determine the distance between the sort of farthest items, or the diameter of the recovery area where the remains were first found?
Yes.
And did you also produce a map documenting that?
Yes.
One moment, please.
Your Honor, the court was tracking this better than we were. Did you look at a Google something outside of the courtroom? I don't know if it was several images or the one that was just played. I'm being shown a different one. The People's Exhibit 49 has been provided to us.
489, so we get the record right?
489.
It is different than what Mr. Champagne is now proposing to introduce into evidence. It's different in what's measured, what's contained in it. So my suspicion is that this is what was shown to witnesses out in the hallway, and then they testified about it. And now there's a new one that the prosecution is seeking to admit. So the problems are compounding with this piece of evidence, and the radius of the diameter of the circle.
Hold on just a second. I don't remember any testimony about this exhibit being shown to witnesses, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's not an issue. So what else are you objecting? You're objecting because you didn't have notice as to the distances that are marked on it, since you did get a copy of 489?
Right. So the basis for admission of the other exhibit was that the witnesses had testified in court that they had observed it and it was fair and accurate. Apparently that hasn't happened with this particular image that's changing between when we're handed it and now what's proposed to be shown to the jury.
Why did the defense not get a copy with the measurements on it and the distances, Mr. Champagne?
I believe the measurements are on there.
Can I see what you both
Sure.
have?
I may approach?
Yes. All right, that's fine. Mr. Champagne?
Thank you, Your Honor. The GPS coordinates that you used for the creation of these exhibits, you drew those from discovery, is that correct?
That's correct.
And many of those were provided years ago, if not months ago?
Yes.
And months, if not years. And that raw data has been available to defense this entire time?
Yes.
Objection, hearsay, I don't know how this investigator would know that, and it's irrelevant.
Well, it's not relevant to the jury. That's more of an argument you should have made up here, Mr. Champagne.
Thank you, Judge.
Do you have a different area that you want to have Mr. Heidel testify about now, or not?
Your Honor, we have one other set of maps, but I think we're going to have to recall Mr. Heidel in order to get those in. We're going to need him at a later time for that.
I would suggest that you double check those so that we don't have this delay again whenever you call him back.
Your Honor, thank you very much. We will.
Double check them with the defense.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Heidel, if you would step down, we'll be calling you back. Or they will.
Okay.
Okay. Then with that change of plans, do you have any witnesses available or not, or do you need to check?
We do.
Great.
Jim Ezzell. People call Jim Ezzell to the stand?
Mr. Ezzell, do you solemnly swear or affirm and affirm perjury the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Have a seat.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Please state your name for the jury, spelling your last name for the record.
Jim Ezzell, Ezzell.
How are you currently employed, sir?
I'm an investigator at La Plata County Sheriff's Office,
And what's your current title?
lieutenant.
You're aware that you're going to be called later in the trial to talk about more of the work you did in connection with the investigation and prosecution of Mr. Redwine, right?
Yes.
And just so the court's aware, you're only being called at this purpose to talk about some of the measurements that you're familiar with in this investigation. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
So I'm going to put Exhibit 220 back on the screen, if that's okay with the court.
Go ahead.
Lieutenant, during the course of your work on this case, have you had the opportunity to track the distances from location to location relevant to the testimony the jury's been hearing thus far?
Yes.
How far is it from 240 to Mr. Redwine's house?
About 11.9 miles, 12 miles.
How far is it from 160, Highway 160, to the defendant's house, Mr. Redwine?
Roughly 20.5 miles.
And have you had the opportunity to review Google Earth image that captures some of the distances between Mr. Redwine's house and recovery site number 1 and recovery site number 2?
Yes, I have.
And are the distances depicted on that exhibit fair and accurate representations of the distances between those locations?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, can I approach the witness with what's been marked previously as Exhibit 223 for identification and just for the record, previously provided to and shown to counsel?
Yes.
And I believe you've already stated the answer to this question, but are the locations in Exhibit 223 a fair and accurate representation along with the distances between each one?
Yes.
Your Honor, the people who now move 223 into evidence.
Mr. Moran?
I have not seen it.
Your Honor, sorry.
You want to let him see what you're showing, Mr. Ezzell? I mean, you don't have a copy of 223?
Your Honor, just for the record, this was provided before the trial started, provided again with the package of exhibits, and provided to counsel at the end of the lunch break today. So I'm confused as to why counsel's stating in front of the jury that he hasn't seen it before.
Because I was looking at Mr. Champagne's exhibit. I don't know what 223 is. I don't see it here.
Well, you know, it's a long trial. There's a lot of evidence, ladies and gentlemen. I'm trying not to use the vernacular. I'm trying to sound like a judge, but things are going to be messed up, okay? So you can fill in whatever words you want. So why don't you let him see it? Would you take the exhibit, let him see it real briefly, and
Sure.
then we'll talk about it?
Of course.
Thank you.
Can I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Thanks. Your Honor, the people had moved to admit 223, and I was waiting on counsel's response.
All right.
No objection to that exhibit. Thank you.
All right. 223 is in.
And with the court's permission, I'd like to publish it for the jury, please.
You may.
Again, Lieutenant, I'm just taking you through the specific distances depicted on Exhibit 223, the jury at this point, okay?
Okay.
How far is it from Mr. Redwine's house to Middle Mountain Road?
It's 3.3 miles from Mark Redwine's house to the intersection with Middle Mountain Road on County Road 500.
That intersection is at the bottom of the screen there on 223, is that right?
Yes.
And with the court's permission, I'd like to have you take the pointer and step off the stand over to the screen, if that's okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Ezzell.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Grab the microphone too, please.
I'm starting from Mr. Redwine's house. How far up Middle Mountain Road do you have to go to get to recovery site number 1?
Starting from Mark Redwine's house, you would follow County Road 500 down to the intersection with County Road 501, follow County Road 501 to the bottom of Middle Mountain Road, which is 3.3 miles, then go up Middle Mountain Road to the first remain site, and it's 8.6 miles.
8.6 by road.
Yes.
How far from Mr. Redwine's house to remain site number 1 as the crow flies? You went in a straight line.
1.27 miles.
Thank you. How far from that point in the road, the jury saw a picture earlier of the yellow sign, how far from that point in the road down the trail to recovery site number 1?
It's right at or just under 100 yards.
The jury saw that video earlier today. Are you the individual who took the video?
Yes, I am.
Approximately how long did it take you to walk that route, including stopping and looking around at different points?
Just about 3 minutes.
And from recovery site number 1 to recovery site number 2, what is the distance by road? If you could take us through that, please, Lieutenant.
From recovery site 1, you would follow Middle Mountain Road all the way up and around to a point right about here along Runlet Park, and that's 14.2 miles from Mark Redwine's house by road.
So just to be clear, 14.2 miles from the defendant, Mark Redwine's house by road, going up to recovery site number 2.
Yes.
What's the change in vertical feet from recovery site number 1 to recovery site number 2?
By traveling from remain site number 1 up the mountainside and over the ridge and down to remain site number 2, approximately 1,500 yards up, 1,500 feet up, and another 500 feet down.
And if one were using Middle Mountain Road, what's the distance between recovery site number 1 and recovery site number 2?
By road, it's about 5.5 miles. 5.6 on the map here.
So 8.6 from the home to recovery site 1, and then 5.6 from recovery site by the number 1 by the road to number 2.
Correct.
And if you take the road to Runlet Park, can you show us where that would bring you out?
If you follow Middle Mountain Road from the bottom all the way up, you come out at Runlet Park. There's a parking area right here, the cattle guard, and this area is known as Runlet Park.
What's the red line we see going to the right from that intersection you just pointed to, sir?
This is just highlighting a portion of the two-track or ATV trail that runs in that area. It kind of goes around Runlet Park.
And you're referring to the red line that goes down from that intersection?
Yes, this line right here.
And how about the other red line going out from there?
This line goes up to the end, to a lock gate, to a camping area and an old mining area.
And if one were to use the road to get to Runlet Park, how far is it from where you would park to recovery site number 2?
It can vary a little bit along the roadway here, say starting from this area on Middle Mountain Road and all the way down the two-track trail here. It's just a little over 0.3 of a mile from here to here. This is a very steep, heavily wooded area. From here, or here, or here, these points, it's roughly half a mile, just right at half a mile, it's a little over half a mile walk.
Your Honor, I have nothing further for Lieutenant Ezzell. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay. Russ?
Lieutenant Ezzell, feel free to have a seat if you'd like. You look comfortable there, that's fine too. I'll have some more questions for you on other issues, but just with respect to what you've mentioned this afternoon, going down from Middle Mountain Road to where remains were found, the first remain site, your testimony was that it's 3 minutes walk down that direction, right?
It's roughly 3 minutes. I could probably do it faster than that.
And where that gets you is to the point on the ridge where then you'd have to drop off to go down to where the folks doing line searches discovered evidence, right? You didn't get off
Phrase that?
Sure. You didn't get off the trail as you walked with the GoPro on your...
No, I stayed on the trail, both the ATV trail and then the hiking trail, until I got to that area.
So then down the ridge, further off the trail to the location of shoe, sock, femur, tibia, that would take you through more thickly wooded area, right?
A little more thickly wooded, quite steep, covered with a lot of deadfall, loose rock, loose soil, and vegetation.
And that femur is down 172 yards or so, more than a football, almost 2 football fields.
Your Honor, objection outside the scope.
Your Honor, when distance is what this whole direct was about, and I'm concerned that without further information, just saying it's 3 minutes to the spot doesn't totally paint a clear picture of
I think he can ask a distance. When you talked about how long it took to walk, I don't see a problem with that.
Your Honor, can I mention one thing?
Sure.
We just had Investigator Heidel on the stand. Counsel objected to the mention of the femur, which he just mentioned. And he objected to Investigator Heidel getting into...
Okay, hold on just a second, because I was trying to go back to that issue to look for something so I'd be ready for tomorrow, and I missed part of the question, so let me get back to it, okay?
Sure.
Your Honor, the court, my recollection of the ruling was that the court said that it was fine because names of the different bones
That's not
known.
what we're talking about. We're talking about the distances, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
I won't base this on any of Mr. Heidel's work. I'll inquire strictly of whether the lieutenant knows. I know he's been up there quite a bit.
Your Honor, if I could just finish what I was saying, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, I interrupted you.
No, thank you. Investigator Heidel was just on the stand trying to talk about the distance between the different items. And the court asked us to bring him back to talk about that further so counsel had more time to look at it.
Well,
This witness...
But because of the slight discrepancy in the two
Oh,
lines.
I understand.
Okay.
This witness is testifying just to what's on this map, and in the interest of time, that's why I'm saying it's outside the scope. Of course, the jury's going to hear all of this. It's just with regards to who the appropriate witness is for it.
All right, I'm going to let it, do you know how far in terms of feet, yards, anything like that it was? And if you don't know, that's fine. If you do, great. If you want to estimate, that's great too, but you need to let the jury know.
My recollection is it was near or a bit over 100 yards.
And then the ATV trail that runs along the west side of Rummet Park, is that gated? Is that all forest land there? I'm sorry, that's 2 questions, if you know.
My recollection is that there is a gate. There's also a sign posted that describes what type of vehicles are permitted to be on that 2-track.
And is the gate open and shut, or does it have a lock and key?
I don't know anything about a lock and key, and every time I've been up there, no matter the time of year, the gate there's never been a gate closed there. It's always been open.
To your knowledge, is that gate open and closed consistent with the gate lower down on Middle Mountain Road that's closed around when the snow flies?
I have no knowledge of that.
Thank you, sir. That's all I have on these issues. Thanks.
Redirect?
Thank you, Your Honor. Lieutenant. You walk down that ATV trail and footpath. You said it takes you approximately how long?
It took me approximately 3 minutes, I think, on the video, a little over 3 minutes, but it's a walk that I can make in less than 3 minutes.
And when you come to a stop at that trail and you look down the ridge, do you recall doing that?
Yes, I do.
How far is it from where you're stopped on that ridge to the 2 trees that we saw on the other exhibits?
I would say roughly 15 feet at the most, maybe 10.
10 to 15 feet.
Yes.
And that's where those remains that we heard about earlier were found between those 2 trees?
Yes.
I have nothing further. Thank you, Lieutenant.
Anything from the jury? Okay, Investigator Ezzell. Can a truck go on the ATV road where the skull was found in Renlet Park?
I'm sorry, in Renlet Park?
That's the question, yes.
Yes, it can.
Okay. And the next question I don't want you to answer is just the jury requesting that they get a copy of, I think it's printed copy of over-the-top view of Site 1 out of the video, with the understanding that some of the items' locations are approximate, and that may be coming later, and it may not. Let's see. Okay. Next witness? Or, well, anything based upon the question?
Not from the people, Your Honor. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Okay. You can step down. You want to take a break now? How long is your next witness going to be? Should we take a break then? Yes, Your Honor. Okay. A little bit before 3, let's start up at 3:15. Nice round figure. Everybody rise for the jury? Okay, we'll be in recess, and just so I can prepare, you have something?
I do.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Judge. We obtained waiver of personal service from Daniel Foster for our portion of the case, and then we personally served him with another subpoena this afternoon. He has informed our investigator. It sounds like he's planning to disregard our subpoena. I was going to ask the court to talk to him during the recess and inform him that the subpoena is a...
Is Mr. Foster here?
He is. He's in the hallway. I've been informed by Mr. Lister.
All right.
I'd rather...
We could bring him in just a second. I just want to know who the witness is in case I have to look at any words.
The next witness?
Yes.
Heather Johnston, and then the next witness after that would be Drayton Harrison. Okay. They're both wildlife experts. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, could you bring in Mr. Foster then? Yeah, I agree.
I apologize, Judge. I know this is our downtime. I was informed he was right out in the corridor moments ago.
I understand. It's okay.
Judge, I don't know if we're on the record, but
Well, we're on the video and we're on the record. Do you want to be on the record?
Yeah, that's fine, Judge. I think Mr. Bogan and I have discussed it. The prosecution will just go ahead and call him probably tomorrow. Hopefully that will obviate need to keep him under subpoena by defense.
Okay, and that's fine. I was gonna suggest that if it's a timing issue, we could put him on it out of order. Okay. So, Mr. Foster, come on up. Just right there, so good enough.
All right.
I need to have you talking to the microphone's the only thing.
Yeah, okay.
I've been told that, you've been served with a subpoena, and that you're, not wanting to comply with it.
Oh, I'm perfectly fine with complying with it. I just have a whole bunch of my own personal things going